Not long ago, I was a corporate sales director, unknown, overlooked, no network, and unfulfilled. But when I discovered the power of personal branding, storytelling, and confidence, everything changed. I went from being invisible to a two-time best-selling author, international TEDx speaker, and top global podcast host, reaching thousands every year. And I want the same transformation for you to be seen, heard, and recognized as the thought leader you truly are. From TEDx stages to top podcasts and even TV segments, I help entrepreneurs, authors, and speakers amplify their message and build unshakable confidence. Visit bestbranding.solutions and let's build your dream together. What if the secret to success wasn't just talent or hard work, but unshakable confidence? Welcome to Grasp Confidence, the podcast where visionary thought leaders, speakers, and entrepreneurs unlock the mindset and strategies for lasting success. I'm your host, LaFon Gooch, CEO, two-time best-selling author, and international TEDx speaker, and I can't wait to help you step into the most powerful version of yourself. Let's dive in. What if leadership wasn't about titles or control, but about upgrading the system that powers everything you do? Eric Pfeiffer is the author of Upgrade Your Leadership: 8 Foundational Tools to Overcome Drama, Build Trust, and Thrive Under Pressure. Through his leadership operating system, Eric equips leaders with simple tools to cut through the chaos, build trust, and create cultures where people thrive. His book shows you how to move beyond quick fixes and step into lasting transformation for yourself, your team, and your organization. Tune into this episode as we reveal how upgrading your leadership can unlock your full potential in business and in life. Eric, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Tara. So glad to finally be in this context with you. We've had lots of other conversations, but to finally join you in your podcast is a treat. So thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. And we dressed alike today.
Yes,
Gotta
we
love
did.
that. We did not plan on this.
We did not plan it.
But I just love your new book. You know, I was fortunate enough to get a sneak peek before and ahead of the release in October coming up. I love everything about this book. It's so actionable. It really, what it does is it equips leaders to unlock their full potential, because even just saying the title, overcoming drama, that's huge in the workplace, right? And the chaos and the putting out of the fires and all of these things that ultimately take the leader and put them in a position where they're not operating in their full capacity. Isn't that right?
That's right. That's absolutely right. Well, it's interesting, I think for us as leaders, even the way you positioned that reflection is we tend to think of the chaos and the fires and the drama going on out there in our teams and our organization with customers, clients, vendors, supply chain issues. But really where the drama and the frustration begins is inside of us, right? Because our experience of the world leads to an interpretation of that world around us. And more often than not, I think for us as leaders, learning how to lead ourselves under pressure through difficult situations is paramount. And so this leadership operating system, these leadership tools are really designed to help us and empower us to lead ourselves through these difficult circumstances well, so that we're postured to lead others well on top of it. And I couldn't be more happy with the results that we've seen with leaders who begin by saying, hey, come in and help us fix our team or our organization or our culture. And then, very shortly into our working together, they say, you know what? I'm realizing that actually this is for me first and foremost. And the work that I do with these tools actually is transforming my confidence to step in and engage with other people around me.
So powerful. I agree with everything you said. You know, I have a saying, and it's probably not my original thought, but I heard it somewhere and I've
None of
adopted
the
it,
good
right?
ones are, don't
It's
worry.
okay. But, they say that before you lead a team of many, you first have to learn self mastery and be
Mhm.
a leader of one.
Right.
And, there's so much information out there right now about leadership, about culture. And it seems to start everywhere else except for that individual leader. And what I love about your approach is that you really start with that individual leader, that self leadership. And then once that person has mastered that, it's time to branch out, right?
That's right.
It's time to
Yeah.
disseminate. It's time to create that ripple effect, right?
Yeah. Well, a popular phrase these days is that we struggle with what people call imposter syndrome, right? This
Yeah.
sneaking suspicion that we're going to be found out,
Yeah.
that somebody's going to discover that we're really not, maybe qualified or as good of leaders as we were hoped that we would be. And what I often tell clients, or even in our podcast or through my writings, is I'm constantly trying to encourage people: you're not alone. I mean, what leadership class did you take in high school? What leadership course did you take in college? At what point were we really trained in a leadership vocabulary and principles and practices that would equip us before we're ever in a leadership position formally? And so for most of us, we find ourselves backfilling. We're in a situation, we have responsibility. And this could be in a workplace, in our family unit, in a friendship group, in our hobby space, and suddenly we have responsibility, and are influencing other people. And we suddenly realize, gosh, I'm not sure how to do this well. And so then we start scrambling, right? And reading books and consuming podcasts and going to conferences, those are all wonderful resources, but it's all trying to backfill an education, a quality of training that most of us never got. And so I often tell leaders, and I'm talking about CEOs, presidents of companies, owner operators of significant organizations behind closed doors, will say, Eric, I never got this stuff. Nobody ever trained me in this. Right? I learned supply chain, I learned business, I did an MBA, I know spreadsheets, I know, financial projections, I know the concepts of scaling a business, but when it comes to the skills of leadership, most people would say, I thought I would just figure it out. And so for most people, there is a degree of insecurity. Um,
Mm.
and I tell people that's okay. It's never too late to start the journey of taking your leadership training seriously.
There was a time when I barely spoke about my faith, but this year I decided to be bolder than ever. God placed a calling on my life, and when I finally embraced it, doors opened. From best selling books to stages, I found the confidence to walk in His purpose. Now I want the same for you. At the From Calling to Confidence Christian Women's Retreat, you'll discover clarity, deepen your faith, and gain the courage to step into your God given calling. This is happening in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico on January 16th through 19th, 2026. And ladies, we have 3 spots left. That's it. So when they're gone, they are gone. Reserve yours today and visit taralafongooch.com/retreat for more information. It is a serious call. We have people that report under us. It's a level of responsibility that we have for not only the people that report to us, but also to our clients.
Yeah,
I do believe that even external people outside of a company can feel your internal leadership and culture.
that's
It's
absolutely true.
apparent. It's apparent. I mean, I remember when I worked in corporate and worked for a large organization, my clients would ask sometimes, how's the office today? How's the culture? How's this person, that person? People are very interested
Yeah, yeah,
and they want to know that they're doing business with someone or an organization that has their stuff together, right?
yeah, yeah. And how many leaders, if you would ask them in their moments of honesty, would even reflect on their own business and say, I don't know that we figured this out. I don't know that we're operating well. I don't know that we're optimizing the talents and the capacity of our team or our organization. And again, I tell people all the time, it's okay. You're not alone. There is a way though. That's the beautiful thing about the message of our coaching business, which is if we can learn a way, there is a way for us to understand in a very simple and yet profound, from a simple and profound perspective, there's a way to understand what is culture. Like I have to remind people all the time that we talk about culture, but then when you ask people to explain what is culture for you, you're going to get as many different responses as there are people in the room.
Mm.
And so let me just give your audience just a really simple, fun little freebie.
Yeah.
When we think of culture, the easiest, simplest way to understand it is through the lens of this old song by Montel Jordan. I'm not sure if we have to give him credit now in this, pay him a royalty from this, but there's this old song that we all know. This is how we do it. This is how we do it. Like most of us who are a little bit older know that tune. We're familiar with it, but that captures culture, the prevailing attitudes and behaviors with which any group of people operate with. That defines the culture. That becomes the culture. So how we handle conflict, how we make decisions, how we do and do not communicate, how we resolve conflict, how we collaborate together, how we operate under lots of pressure. These are all rooted in the attitudes and behaviors. But every person, think about it, in any company or team, is probably showing up to that space with their own idea of how they should engage all of those different features of working together with other people. And so if there isn't what I call a shared playbook of attitudes and behaviors that we're all going to subscribe to, that's like putting the best athletes out on the basketball court in the NBA, for example. And if they don't have a shared playbook, they're all going to run different plays. They're going to run a different style of offense, a
Mm.
different style of defense, right? They're all going to come at everything with from their own lens of what works and what doesn't work. And so one of the coach's jobs, as I believe is the job of leaders in any organization or team, is to provide that shared playbook of, hey, no matter where we come from, we're all going to embrace this way of operating because it's going to help optimize everyone individually as well as how we operate together as a team.
Wow. So powerful. I never really considered that different people have different definitions of what culture is.
Yeah.
But it really takes a coach to bring it all together. And I loved your analogy with, sports basketball. They have a playbook to follow. They have a strategy. If they didn't have that strategy, the right hand wouldn't know what the left hand was doing. They would and they would definitely not increase their chances they would win, right?
Yeah. Right.
And we think about a team of, a relatively small amount of people who have not only a head coach, but they have other specialized coaches. And that's why they're the best. That's why they're in the NBA. That's why they're in the pros, right? So, I think a lot of organizations don't really consider that the power of having a coach. And what I love about coaching as well is that it's an outsider's perspective, it's a third party perspective. There's a saying I have, we can't see the holes in our own ship, which
Ooh, I
means
like that.
we can't.
That's right. Those blind spots.
The blind spots. That's right. And that's why we need to hire an expert to see those holes that we otherwise wouldn't see, those blind spots. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I 100% agree that in any area of life where we're trying to grow and develop, for example, I'm an avid, very sub amateur golfer, but I love it. It's an incredible sport that I fell in love with. It gives me a space to kind of a competitive outlet, right, as a former collegiate athlete. But what I realized very quickly is that I would watch these videos and try to mimic the videos. And as I was trying to learn a basic fundamental golf swing that would kind of be effective and sustain me through a round of golf. And one day I had a buddy at the course with me out on the driving range, and he was a very experienced and a very good golfer. And so he was watching me struggle trying to warm up for the round, and I'm not hitting the ball very well. And he asked me a few questions, and I said, no, you don't understand. I've been watching these videos. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And he looked at me, kind of quizzically, and he said, Eric, I don't think you know what you're doing because I'm watching you, and those are not the things that you're actually doing in your swing. You're actually doing things that are very different." And I thought to myself, "That's not possible. I know my body. I'm a former high level athlete. I should know." But the reality was it took somebody outside of me to observe objectively and to be able to help me see what I could not see in that moment, which was I actually wasn't performing the physical, movements that I in my brain had convinced myself I was. Because what we feel in any given moment, even as leaders in any situation, is oftentimes very different to what's actually going on. And so I have really enjoyed my journey into the work of coaching because in every area of my life that I've sought to grow or develop,
Mhm.
it has required that I invite somebody outside of myself, somebody with more experience, more expertise, just even an outside perspective, i.e., my wife, a lot of the time, to help me see what I can't see, so that I can begin to make the subtle adjustments that are going to get me the results that I'm actually looking for. But of course, that requires that I check my ego, I submit my pride, and I say, okay, I'm willing to let somebody else speak into this area of my life. So, what a privilege, what an honor it is for us as coaches to be able to enter into what I would call a very sacred space for leaders where they already kind of feel a little bit of like, I'm not sure I know what I'm doing. That's why I'm hiring a consultant or coach in. It requires a lot of humility on their side. And so when we get to enter into that space and to begin the process of helping them see what they can't see, it's a powerful, powerful experience. And the leaders who are willing to engage that process are the ones who grow dramatically and avoid what I call the kind of the plateau. I think
Ooh.
more of us than we realize are plateaued in areas of our life, not because we're not trying, right? The person who's been on all the fad diets and has gone to the gym 4 or 5 days a week, but has never actually invited a health expert or a trainer into their life experience. And so they're trying to do it all on their own. They think because they've read the books or watched the videos that they can reproduce what they've seen, only to find that once they finally invite somebody and they realize I actually wasn't being honest with myself. I actually didn't realize what I was missing or what I wasn't doing appropriately. But it's in that space where we're willing to invite somebody else in that gives us the greatest opportunity to experience personal transformation and to elevate ourselves to new levels and avoid the plateau.
The plateau is huge, right? We can hit a plateau in anything in our lives.
Yes.
Fitness, our relationships, our business. I hear from entrepreneurs all the time that they've hit a plateau, right? They've hit a plateau. And usually people say they've hit a plateau in their business. They just can't seem to get above X amount of MRR a month or something like that. But then you just take a few layers deeper and the plateau didn't start there. It manifested there, right? But it didn't start there. It
Yes.
usually starts either in a relationship or their friend circle or what they're telling themselves. You mentioned imposter syndrome. If you don't believe you can hit a certain goal, you will be right 100% of the time.
That's absolutely true.
Don't you think?
That's absolutely true. I often will draw a picture on a whiteboard when I'm working with clients. I love whiteboards. I love
Yeah.
visible images because I think it just gets our brain more involved. I'll draw a picture of like a line, like a horizontal line, and then above that line, I'll draw just like the outline of a basic tree, and I'll put little circles on the tree, like little pieces of fruit, and I'll say, hey, for us as human beings, actually in any area of our life, but this absolutely holds true in any context of leadership. Most of our days are filled with the experience of that tree, that what I call the symptomatic issues, our experience, what's going well, what's not going well, what's frustrating, right? Those are the like everyday moment by moment experiences. But very few people have developed the ability
Mm.
to look below that horizontal line into the root system of that tree. And as we all know, anybody who's lived long enough understands the basic concept that what's going on in that root system, the systemic dynamics of that organism, are driving what's happening above the line. And so it's above the line, below the line kind of ideology. And if we don't know how to look below the line or beneath the hood of the car, whatever other analogy our listeners would prefer, and diagnose what's happening down there, then we have no real possibility of changing what's happening above the line. So when we talk about putting out fires and dealing with drama and the toxicity in the workplace and all the unresolved tensions and frustration, the siloing, all the stuff that we're just like, gosh, how do I deal with this? Well, what we're mostly doing is we're just basically trying to deal with that one little issue at a time. And then we start feeling frustrated because we can't get ahead of the challenges. And so we end up feeling overwhelmed. And that's when people, I think, start to experience subtle forms of depression and frustration and a sense of like, I don't know if I want to do this. But once you help a leader begin to see below the line and they begin to understand the systemic dynamics that need to be addressed, and then they begin to address those dynamics and they start to see not just almost immediate transformation, but sustainable transformation, because now you're dealing with the root system. It literally opens their eyes. And if it's like, oh my gosh, how have I never understood this before? But that's no different than, every once in a while, my wife and I have been married now for 24 years. And every once in a while, we go through a rough patch and we're trying to figure it out together and we don't know how to do it. And so then we go and what do? We get a coach, we get a marriage counselor, and we say, help us see what we can't see. Help us see the systemic dynamics in our marriage that if we don't address are just going to continue to produce problem after problem after problem, which if we could resolve would actually alleviate all those problems and sometimes even more problems than we could imagine. And so that's part of the journey for us, I think, in any area of life, but let alone for us as leaders in an organization, is we've got to develop our ability to see not just above the line, but what's going on below the line so that we can address the real systemic dynamics that are frustrating us and creating unnecessary, difficulties.
Absolutely. Sometimes the below the line things are sources of shame for people, though.
Mhm.
They're embarrassed to admit them.
Yeah.
They're afraid of judgment. So these things, get buried and don't get brought up. And they get buried on performance. They get buried on some KPI, and it becomes something else they chase instead of dealing with the root cause.
Yeah.
I feel like a very common problem that I don't hear a lot of people talking about is like, what is the true root cause? And I feel like a lot of it is a source of shame for people.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced that?
Well, first of all, I've experienced that a ton in my own journey.
Thank you for always being vulnerable and honest.
Yeah, whether that's as a husband, a father, a friend, a leader, a follower, just being on somebody else's team.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I've experienced that so much. Um, but here's one of the things that I learned years ago that really catapulted me, I think, into this line of work. Like we said earlier, we can only lead others to the degree that we can lead ourselves. And self leadership always begins with self awareness. And we love to talk about self awareness. Now, first of all, let me say to our audience that, in all the research that's been done, uh, people overestimate their self awareness by a huge amount. So let's just start there. You're not
Huge.
alone, right? Most
Huge.
people like to think that they really understand themselves and understand what's going on mentally, emotionally, and even physically. Um, but it was my journey with a former mentor that acted like that coach, that mirror to reflect back to me things about myself that, quite frankly, I didn't like, that I did feel shame in, or guilt, or regret, or the fear of disqualification. If somebody found out this about me, would that disqualify me from my current work or from future opportunities? But it was actually with the help of that mentor that I learned and kind of this kind of threefold or three-step process of practicing self-awareness that actually leads to greater freedom And so we talk about the 3 steps of beginning with brutal honesty, which is not easy. So we're gonna have to see what we don't wanna see. But at the same time, we also have to see the good along with the bad. And what's interesting in working with leaders, sometimes leaders have a really difficult time recognizing or acknowledging all of their strengths and the incredible value that they bring to any situation, including their team or organization, right? So honesty is about seeing the good and the bad with no judgment. Just simply, it is what it is. I tell people it's just neutral. It is what it is. And if we can accept that everybody's got gold and dirt, in their life, right? And so, but here's the good news: if you want to get more gold, what do you got to do? You got to dig through the dirt. So the hope of dealing with the dirt that we find in ourselves is actually that we're through that process going to discover or excavate more gold. And then it's humility, and humility is often defined as, in some circles as don't think too highly of yourself, make yourself lower, which I think is the opposite of honesty, which is, hey, if I'm really good at something and you don't, I'm really good at that, right? Um, or other ways that people think about humility is I need to think of myself less often. And I
Mm,
think actually, no, one of the problems in our culture today is that we don't spend enough time in self-reflection and self-understanding. I think humility is actually better defined this way. It is not it is taking what we see in the honesty and learning to accept who we are for better and for worse today. To accept it, to make peace with the fact that I can't be who I wish I was in a year or 5 years from now, but I'm also not who I was a year or 5 years ago. So humility is about making peace with this is who I am today for better and for worse. And then we've got to move to the third step, which is self-love, which is always a conundrum for leaders. When we walk them through, this is part of one of our tools, dealing with emotional intelligence. They have such a hard time with self-love because we define self-love as your ability to forgive yourself and to give yourself permission to grow, to become a better version of yourself, right? It's saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to hold myself indebted for past, you know, uh, bad behaviors or attitudes. I'm going to recognize them. I'm going to accept that this is a part of who I am right now, but I'm going to give myself permission to become a better version. Right. And so that sets us free from the kind of the shackles or the heavy weights that we've carried. And I can't tell you how many leaders, when I ask them of those 3 core skills, honesty, humility, and self-love, which do you struggle with most? And almost 98% of leaders will say, I don't know about this self-love thing. This is really difficult. So, but it was my journey of practicing self-love in the way I'm talking about that actually allowed me to have the confidence to recognize my deficiencies, and to give myself permission to keep growing and to learn new ways of operating, and which allowed me to avoid the plateau. And so that's how we coach other leaders. So they have to deal with, of course, shame and all the accompanying emotions of not being who we wished we were. But what people discover through that process is actually a quality of internal freedom, that allows them to move forward. And
mm.
moving forward is literally the remedy to the plateau.
It is. Oh my gosh. I'm going to repeat a line from one of your podcast episodes. By the way, big fan. Everybody tune into NPR, Empower podcast. Um, you said we're human beings, not human doings. And I think it's so easy for us to focus on the strategy, focus on the revenue, focus on the bells, the whistles, the systems. And it's not to undercut any of those and to make them less than. We need that in business to thrive, to scale. But if you don't focus on the person first, ultimately none of those systems, those bells, those whistles are really going to align.
That's right.
When you focus on the human being and you prioritize the human being first, all of a sudden alignment just is a natural result.
That's
It's
right.
not forced either. It's like in a flow state, right?
I love that. Yeah. I mean, in the same way that a software engineer is responsible to write code for programs that deliver on certain results. And if the program doesn't operate effectively or gets a bug in it, what is a computer engineer's job? To rewrite the code, to fix the code so that the program operates well.
Mm.
And I think in the same way, that's just an analogy. I'm just full of analogies. In the same way, I think for us as leaders, we don't realize that people really are the engine of business. And I know right now everybody's terrified that AI is going to take everybody's job. It's probably going to replace certain jobs, but it's not going to replace a lot of jobs. And the most important jobs will always, always, always be filled by human beings. And in any organization, it's going to require human beings who work well together. As a matter of fact, I would suggest that in all of the companies I've ever had the privilege of working with, and we're talking professional sports, we're talking finance, we're talking law, we're talking public health, we're talking, smaller mom and pop startups. I mean, you name the industry or the size of company, we've had the privilege of working with them. And when we come in, it is always the case that what is undermining the success and effectiveness or the greater success or effectiveness of that team or company is not a computer system or a product or a service. It is almost always the way that people are operating individually and collectively. And so part of what we do, it's why I love using the analogy of our leadership system being a leadership operating system, because we all know the frustration of, the early smartphones, when you pick up your phone, you try to open it up an app and it would crash and it wouldn't work. And oftentimes that was because the operating system was outdated. And so
Mm.
remember when we had to manually upgrade operating system and
Yeah.
it'd take all night long, you hope it was
Yeah.
done. Now it just happens. Now it just happens while we're sleeping. We don't even think about it. It's on automatic. But that's because what most people don't realize about these incredible devices, think of all the apps, like all of the tasks and responsibilities and things that a team or a business is trying to accomplish, right? But the operating system of these smartphone devices, which is the real miracle of these devices, is this kind of parental software. Sorry, that's my wife and my daughter.
Oh,
Yeah, proud husband, proud dad. Um, but the operating system is this parental software code that is responsible for managing the energy, the memory, the power, the how all of these apps integrate and work together. And so in the same way as a computer engineer or a programmer, we as leaders have to pay attention to how people individually and collectively are operating. And if we don't provide a healthy code that they can operate by, or what we referred to earlier as a shared playbook, then what's going to happen is everyone's going to basically move in their own direction, do what they think is best, handle situations the way they learned in their previous job or from their upbringing in their childhood, right? Because we're all bringing this programming from all of our years, before into our current situation. And so part of our job as leaders, I believe, is to provide that code or that parental software, which we call a leadership operating system. And our great joy is, and I'm kind of playing with this analogy, but our great joy as coaches is not to solve every problem. That's impossible because problems are going to come up every single day. But what I tell leaders is our job is to equip you with the code that will not just allow you to solve one problem, but thousands and tens and thousands of problems. I can, it's the whole idea of like, I can catch you a fish or I can teach you how to fish. Which one would you prefer? One makes you dependent on me. The other one gives you a sustainable lifestyle. Which one do you like? And they always say, I think the sustainable one. Okay, great. So we do take time when we're working with clients to download, in air quotes, download this leadership operating system. And what they find very quickly is it becomes the way that they operate, not just individually, but as a team. They have shared language, they have shared practices. And before you know it, guess what? They're not just a bunch of individual amazing contributors. They're now starting to operate as a team.
Mm.
And as we've seen in any professional sports, context and in business, you can have amazing contributors, individual contributors, but if they don't know how to work well together, the business suffers, period. And the bottom line suffers. And I would suggest that virtually every company we've worked with, because we're always asking them to give us measurables to show the traction, the momentum, the transformation. And one of the questions we ask is, yes, we're working with them every 6 months or so, is how are you guys doing bottom line? And almost always, there's an uptick in the bottom line financially because they're learning to prioritize people, not just productivity and profits.
Oh my gosh. Preach. I love it.
I
It's
might be a
so
little passionate about this stuff.
you're just a little passionate about it, and that's great. No, I love it. Again, I think back to the sports analogy, if a team is out in the field or out on the court and they're each individual operators. Again, they're the top of their class, right? I mean, nobody can argue, but they don't necessarily win the game if they're each operating as their own team,
That's right.
do they? They win the game, and again, you can see it. There's a feng shui to it. It's a je ne sais quoi. It's hard to put into words, but it's a flow state. You can see when the individual team members almost have a shared mind.
That's right. That's
It's
right.
it's a fascinating thing, and again, it's hard to put into words, but that is the transformative nature of this. What we're talking about is not a quick fix. It's not a short, uh, term solution. This is a long-term, sustainable, and
That's
I'm
right.
gonna call it a blueprint. It's a map. It's a
I love it.
compass.
I love it. I love it. I love all those.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a compass, and if you wanna get to the North Star, which we all do in business and in life, you have to follow the map to get
that's right.
there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Wow, so
And
powerful.
part of what I tackled years ago, which is kind of how I came upon this concept of a leadership operating system, was that I was terribly frustrated as I was a young leader trying to figure out how to do this stuff and running into lots of challenges. And then once I realized, oh my gosh, I'm a lot of the problem, right? That's where it always starts.
Yep.
By us taking 100% personal responsibility for our contribution to the dysfunction and frustration. But then I started reading all these books and going to conferences and consuming podcasts and trying to get every little bit of leadership um, teaching I could access. But I constantly felt frustrated because I felt like I was taking one idea and another idea and another idea and another idea and trying to kind of push them all together and synthesize them, and often just felt frustrated. And so then over time, because that's what most of us do, right? We're constantly consuming more content,
Yeah.
hoping that the information leads to transformation.
Mm.
And the problem is that that doesn't have a very high success rate for any of us in any area of life. Most of us don't read a book and then fix our car. Or read a book and suddenly are incredible parents, or read a book and suddenly know how to do marriage, or read a book and suddenly know how to even scale our companies. We can read all those books, but it's not until we have partnership and people to come alongside of us and help us do all the things that we've been talking about this morning, and to help us see the blind spots and to help us recalibrate how we're operating. But it was my own journey of realizing, gosh, you know what, I think I need to figure out a way of understanding leadership that allows for all of the beautiful ideas out there so I can access them and utilize them. But that's when I stumbled upon the operating system metaphor. Was I was reading an article about Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and the creation of these operating systems and the genius behind them. And I thought, and they were talking about how the greatest problem was not that there weren't a lot of great apps out there, but it's that there were no operating systems that could actually power those apps. And so if you think of these apps, like all these different skill sets and tasks and responsibilities and things we're trying to accomplish, what I realized is the problem isn't with all these books and leadership ideas that I've learned. The problem is in me, is that I don't know how to effectively employ them. And so that's when I set upon a journey of saying, how do I create a leadership operating system, right? A fundamental way of understanding myself and the world around me, that regardless of background, race, religion, leadership experience, economic, social, economic, status, whatever our background is, that would work for any human being to understand fundamentally, if I want to optimize the way that the version of me that I bring to any context, what would that look like? And so that's what our leadership tools essentially do is number one, they give us a very clear picture or vision of what it means for us to be the best version of ourselves. Number two, the tools act like a diagnostic to help us reflect on ourselves and our environment so that we better see the blind spots and so that we can see below the line into the systemic issues that are really going on, right? The root causes. And not only diagnose, but to begin to recalibrate those. And thirdly, these tools give us like a new set of lenses. How frustrating is it when we're looking at a situation, we don't even know how to read it. We don't know how to interpret or understand what's going on. Right. I remember the first time I went in, and I got to the optometrist and had to get my eye exam. And they were like, read the letters. I'm like, yeah, this one, this one. I said, okay, read these. And I was like, I can't read those. And then they put that big machine with all the different, lens,
Mhm.
prescriptions, and you start flipping them. And I'm like, nope, 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 not a little better. And I'll never forget the experience of having the one that flipped over my eyes. And I thought, oh my gosh, hold on. I can see that letter crystal clear.
Mm.
And the optometrist, "Whoa, great, that's probably your prescription." So I got my order in. 2 weeks later, came back to pick up my glasses at that time at Costco, and I got my glasses. And this is a true experience. I was with my wife, and I'm in Costco, which I'd been in 100 times up to that point. And I put the new glasses on, and I looked up. I immediately felt this rush of overwhelmed and like shock and awe and this adrenaline of like, what am I experiencing? Because for the first time, I was seeing things up high and the ceiling, and I was seeing so many things in the store that I never really saw before because I didn't have the interpretive lens to help me see something that was unclear before suddenly very, very clearly. And that's the experience that people have when they embrace these tools is it gives them an ability for things that they could not understand or interpret or see clearly before suddenly becomes immensely clear.
I love that. Oh my gosh. I love your analogies. They're so powerful and sticky, which is important. As you're thinking, I was watching a podcast a few weeks ago and it was the topic of something about finding a soulmate or whatever. And he said, if you're interested in finding your soulmate, write down all the characteristics of your soulmate. What do they look like? Do they go to the gym? Are they interesting? Do they travel? Do they speak different languages? Do they have this type of personality and disposition XYZ? And then what you do to find them is to become them.
I love that.
And every single day, if you want your soulmate to go to the gym, you go to the gym. If you want your soulmate to be more cultured, you be more cultured. If you want your soulmate to speak 3 languages, you start learning languages. And all of a sudden you attract like attracts like.
Yeah,
The same thing we can do as leaders, Eric.
that's right. That's right.
We can put down on a piece of paper who I think are or what the characteristics of a great leader are. And you know what I can do as a responsible person? I can start becoming those characteristics and embodying them, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I mean, and that's again,
Feel it.
just to
Feel free to
echo what
feel it.
yeah, just to echo what I just said, that's why we create this leadership operating system because most people, if you ask them to write these qualities down of what kind of leader do I want to be,
Yeah.
it's really difficult,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's really difficult for them to kind of have a snapshot of what that actually looks like. And so that's why we've written this new book, Upgrade Your Leadership, to provide all of these core leadership tools. I mean, we have a larger toolkit than what's in this book, but these are the 8 core leadership tools that make up the core operating system. But just to give people a beginning framework. I tell people if you want to change it, or if any of these tools do not reflect or represent the kind of leader or person that you want to be, then abandon it. No big deal. There's 8 tools in there. You can choose 5 of them if you want. But what I'm always surprised by is that as people read through the tools or learn about the tools through our coaching process, to date, this is a true story, to
Wow.
date. And we worked with leaders from every background imaginable, every age group, every whatever. To date, not one person. And I invite them. I say, hey, listen, if any of this doesn't reflect who you want to be, a vision of the quality of or kind of leader you want to be, let us know, and don't worry about it. To date, not one person has ever said, nope, this isn't the kind of leader I want to be.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, what they do say is, thank you for finally providing for us a very simple, clear framework of the kind of leader that I've known intuitively I want to be, but I've not known how to articulate it, let alone all the other benefits of the tools to actually diagnose and operate in alignment with that framework. But for most of us, I just tell people, I said, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. As a matter of fact, none. This is a rough draft copy of the book, but none of the principles in here are new,
Yeah.
right? These are all well-worn, tried principles for millennia in the writings of history of humanity, where people have said, this is what allowed me to unlock the best version of me. And we see all these principles reflected in other books and content that we consume. But I tell people, I said, listen, this is an incredible starting point. As a matter of fact, right now I'm in a process of speaking with a few universities to say, guys, this is the stuff I wish I had been trained in, that I had access to in my early to mid 20s. Would have transformed my life so much sooner than having to figure it all out on my own over the years. My kids have been trained in this operating system, and it's shocking to juxtapose my kids who are 22 and 20 with their friends. Great kids, but it's very clear when they're under pressure, when they're having to make big decisions, when they're having to take responsibility, when they're having to deal with their failures or their struggles, that they are not equipped with any kind of framework that gives them clarity about how do I operate in this situation to bring my best self forward. And where with my kids, what you'll hear from them all the time is, yeah, we struggle just like everybody else, but we do have an idea of how we want to operate in this situation.
It's everything. And again, it goes back to the bit about self-awareness we, discussed, that pretty much everybody, if you asked anybody, if you're self-aware, people are going to raise their hands. Everyone, right? But the vast majority of people are not. So I feel like, a lot of this journey starts with that acknowledgement,
Yeah,
that self-awareness piece,
yeah,
and
of
just
course.
saying, you know what, I'm not where I want to be. And that's okay.
Yeah,
It's okay. Then it's about taking that next action step, digging into the tools, proving frameworks that work, and doing some exploration of
mhm,
yourself, right? Some examination. And then that'll help you get the clarity to move forward and get out of that plateau, right?
that's right. Yeah, and to move forward in a way where there's some confidence
Yes.
that it's going to work. And
Yes.
that's the thing. I'm a pragmatist at heart, right? Like, so I did my undergrad study in philosophy. I did graduate studies and partly in organizational leadership. And I remember thinking, like, this is all great, sounds awesome, but it's all theory.
Yeah.
And what I need to bridge the gap between the theoretical and the actual or practical. And so that's what we have fought for in this coaching system is, how do we give people actionable, practical handles that will give them confidence that if they do choose this direction, it's going to give them more of the desired results that they're looking for. The problem is, how many things have we tried and it just doesn't really give us the results we're looking for? And so we abandon that for another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. And I just tell people, I say, guys, life is short. We don't have time to do that. We need something that we know is going to work, is tried and true, that's going to give us the desired results that we're looking for. But on the other side of that conversation, it does require a bit of sweat equity and humility.
Yes. It does. It always requires some elbow grease, and that's okay.
Hmm.
It's nothing worth having is worth having easy, right? And I think it makes you appreciate it when you actually do have it, because a part of that is the journey of building your capacity.
That's right. That's
And
right.
capacity is not built in comfort,
Mm, mm-mm.
is
Nope.
it?
I wish it was. It's not.
I wish it was too. Wouldn't that be just so that's the easy button, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh.
Oh wow. So many nuggets of wisdom in this episode. Anybody can benefit from this. Listen, guys, if you're a leader of many or if you're a leader of one. Maybe you're a solopreneur, maybe you're a coach, maybe you're a new entrepreneur, maybe you're just a mom or dad or a married person. Guess what? That's a union. And within any union, there could be potential conflicts or drama or angst.
Yes.
It's so important, as with anybody, to learn these tools of leadership for yourself and for others. It honestly benefits the entire world when you become a better leader. So take this episode, explore Eric's work, visit his website. He's got a podcast people are raving about. I think it just passed 1.2K reviews on Spotify.
Honestly, Tara, we've been like everybody else. We just kind of threw some up and started saying, well, you know what, we're going to share this stuff, and we want to make this more accessible to a broader audience, which is kind of the phase of our business development that we're in, because everything's been so much just like proof of concept. Let's make sure it works, and let's get enough. We want a reputation to be built on what works, not on good ideas. And so, but yeah, we threw a few podcasts out there, and we've got people all over the world listening. We're like, okay, we'll throw out some more. We just kept going, and it's a wild ride.
Yeah. Guys, start that podcast too, because it was one of those things, and you weren't sure about it in the beginning. None of us are sure. We're all thinking, where is this going to go? Is anybody going to listen? We never know until we put that work out there and do it with heart and purpose, like you're doing it, and people respond like wildfire. So, guys, take your favorite part of this and apply it today. You don't have to apply everything. Take one thing that we taught you today and apply it right now in your life, and plant that seed, fertilize it, watch it grow, because it will. And it'll help you get out of that plateau. And once you've really mastered that one thing, stack on another. Stack on another. Habits work best when stacked and compounded every time, don't they, Eric?
I love it. Compounding interest. That's what I want.
Absolutely. Well, guys, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Eric, for this interview. Thank you for everyone who tuned into this episode of Grasp Confidence Podcast. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a review, and tell your friends. And if you're a big fan of the show, I'd love to have you on as well. I love interviewing fans of the show. So send me a DM. You know where to find me. I'm on LinkedIn too much. Email. You have all my contact info. I'd love to hear from you. We will see you on the next episode. Take care.